This is Jon Brickner with Hacking HR, and I'm here today with Gary Beckstrand, Vice President of OC Tanner Research Institute, which is really the research arm of OC Tanner. And Gary spends his time really listening to employees and finding out what's building thriving organizations. So Gary, one of the crowdsourced topics this year was the employee experience. And I know you and your organization have done a lot of research on the employee experience. How do you define that, and how has your research shaped that?
That's a great question, John, and I appreciate the opportunity of being with you today. Our understanding or definition of the employee experience is based on extensive research informed by employees around the world, because a few years ago, we kind of pivoted and changed our approach and made a conscious decision to take more of an employee-centric angle to our workplace culture research. As HR professionals and organizations as a whole, we've often kind of looked at the employee experience and defined it by the employee lifecycle model that takes, as you know, a time-based view of significant career events. And while this framework or approach is helpful in many ways, it often leads to one-size-fits-all people initiatives that address a small number of employee circumstances rather than focusing on an employee's everyday human interactions or events. Employees actually, to get to your question on how we define the employee experience, employees equate their experience to their personal day-to-day experiences. Every conversation had, every email read, recognition received or not received, how they've been treated by their leaders, how easy or difficult it is to get resources, answers, or information. And what employees experience is not the once or twice, 3-4 times a year HR initiative tied to a particular life cycle stage, but all the micro experiences they encounter each and every working day. And it's those micro experiences that really make the difference. We talk about the importance of, in everything we do as leaders, to create peak or positive experiences for our employees. That it's those peak experiences that are memorable and really color our overall perception of our employee experience. And those peak moments go a long ways to offset the, everyday common negative things that happen to us, right? They're just part of work, but actually create this value perception or this positivity, if you will, that allows us to continue to move forward and do great work.
And what are you seeing heading into 2021? It's great that you already pivoted to the employee-centric view. How are thriving organizations reimagining the employee experience headed into 2021?
They've realized that it really is about redefining and changing the expectations that we have towards our leaders. I was just listening to a keynote speech this morning by Michael C. Bush from the Great Places to Work. And he indicated that 70% of our employee experience is defined or impacted, if you will, by the person we immediately report to, right, or our leader. And I think that coincides with what our research indicates, that it really is the leader that sets the stage. And because of that, I think one of the keys will be to, again, reimagine our approach and expectations of leaders. Modern leaders, right? Making that transition to modern leadership, where modern leaders reject traditional leadership, the traditional leadership model of directing, evaluating, and gatekeeping. And instead, they tend to focus on coaching, developing and empowering their people to do great work. And these leaders connect the work to a greater sense of purpose, facilitate collaboration and inclusion, openly share information, and show appreciation. And I think too many of us, including myself, quite honestly, from time to time, are stuck in a traditional leadership mindset and struggle to build those connections, especially with younger generations. And as we've seen recently through the many challenges we face, COVID and other issues, that this becomes most apparent again in times of uncertainty. And we often fall into old habits of trying to control work by directing rather than coaching, putting our people on the defensive by continually evaluating rather than developing, and inhibiting progress by holding back information rather than trusting our teams with transparency. Modern leaders clearly communicate that they have their employees' best interests in mind, and that puts them in the best position to build connections by influencing, again, those positive experience and context of everyday moments that are meaningful to employees. And they need to connect their people to the things that matter most. So another area that our research points to is not only expecting more modern leadership characteristics from our leaders, but also expanding leadership accountability throughout the organization. And I think that's going to manifest itself in organizations taking a much broader approach to leadership development and making that available to all employees, regardless of whether or not you have someone reporting to you or not. And that notion of shared leadership, or helping everyone demonstrate leadership capabilities, if you will go a long ways to create a greater workplace environment where, again, people feel connected. And I think in the past, we've just limited too much of our leadership development to those high potential employees or to current leaders. And those organizations, again, that are kind of out in front of this and leading the way are setting the example of really expanding and creating leadership development to all employees across the organization.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for helping to flip the script and challenge us all toward an employee-centric and employees as leader view of the world. And where can our participants get your latest research study?
Thanks, John. Yeah, we just launched that recently. It's available. You can go to octanner.com and you'll see where you can download the full report. We've also included an interactive executive summary and some video summaries of each of the chapters to make that much more accessible. And again, that's available to you. And again, we are grateful for the opportunity to provide and shed some information that may be helpful.